welcome to Trying Times. If you're new here, my name's Carmen. Welcome. We're basically besties now. So, yeah, thank you for tuning in. That's it. That's the whole episode. No, my name's Carmen, and this show is basically just meant to feel like a chill and fun phone call with a friend, or almost like a session of us catching up and just talking about really a bunch of random stuff. This episode in particular, though, is going to be a little bit more personal, I think, than the last few that I've done, as it's going to pertain to my birthday and a very, I guess, milestone type age, if we want to call it that. Before I say that, though, I will acknowledge the elephant in the room for anybody that might actually listen to this regularly or tune in regularly. I tend to post once a month, and I'm not going to beat around the bush and avoid the fact that I didn't post anything last month. I just did not have time, energy, feelings for it, truth be told. I did not have any capacity for it. And so I had to be like, well, I can't post. It's just not happening. And while it made me feel a little bit sad, it also helped me take that time to recharge. So thank you for being patient with me and not being angry. I'm back now, and I hope that this episode feels like a good one for you, because I think it's going to feel like a good one for me. So yeah, today we're going to be talking about turning 30. What the heck? That's crazy. But we're here. We're a few days into it now. Can report that I feel exactly the same, except my back just hurts a little bit more. And I don't even think that that's attributed to age. I think it's attributed to me not stretching. That's something you have to do as you get older, stretch. And I've not been doing it enough. So yeah, that's not what the whole episode's about. I want to talk about the idea of this being a milestone. It's a milestone that feels both strangely very big and at the same time intangible. I mean, that's age in itself, right? Like, as you get older, you can't run away from it, and it's not something you can physically hold on to. But what you do have is the life that you've lived up until that point to reflect on and remember how far you've come, how much you've learned as a person, what you've done over time, what some of your favorite things might be, what some of your dislikes might be. You learn so much every single year, let alone over the course of your life. So this episode's a little bit about that, and just some of the feelings that might come with this milestone birthday. I'll say for me, it's felt like a little bit of, like I said, a mix of reflection and at the same time anticipation. Because I think looking back at the person that you were in your 20s, aka the person I was last week, truthfully, but looking at the person that you were back in your 20s and thinking again about all those lessons that you've learned and the version of yourself that you're still building, but how much it's been built since your 20s and in your 20s, is like this very, I guess I don't want to call it emotional, but it is a very emotional thing. You come a very long way, and you grow a lot in that time. So it's not something to be discounted. And that's why in this episode I want to talk about all of that, really, and I want to share what stepping into my 30s has taught me about growth, perspective, and then also the subtle ways that life shifts once you reach this decade. Don't get me wrong, I think I have a lot to live here. I have a lot to learn, a lot to live, a lot to laugh, a lot to love, but I just want to share off the top of my head some of those things. So, as I always like to do, I love sharing some sort of a statistic or a fun scientific fact if I can find one. So, for this one, I actually found that research shows that the late 20s to early 30s is often a period of identity consolidation. What does that mean? Let's learn together. It basically means it's this time where people gain a stronger sense of self and clearer priorities, which sounds kind of ideal to me and honestly incredible. But basically, what it means is that by the time you hit the age 30, most, if not a lot of adults, have experienced a shift in emotional regulation. We're generally better at managing stress and making decisions that align with long-term goals and all other kinds of things like that. So, interestingly enough, psychologists note that life satisfaction tends to dip slightly in the late 20s before rising again in the early 30s, often because this decade brings a combination of responsibility and self-awareness. Which kind of made me think the other day, because a lot of the time as you're ending really any era, like as a teen, for the longest time, if someone was like, oh my God, what was your favorite age to have lived so far? I would have easily have been like, oh, probably like 19. I just felt like that was a really good age for a long time. Would I say that about 29? I don't know. I personally didn't dislike it at all. I actually learned a lot about myself. I put myself into a lot of rooms and spaces where I had to step out of my comfort zone. And I think that that was really important for me to do. So maybe I would say, I guess, a decade later, 29 was my favorite. But I think in my 20s, I experienced so much more that it's hard to pick one age where I'm like, oh, I really love this age, or this was a really good time, where I learned a lot about myself, because I felt like I learned so much over the course of all of those years. It's kind of insane to think now that I've exited it and I'm starting a new chapter, if you will. But it's also very exciting. So I think a lot of that idea of a dip slightly in your late 20s comes from this idea of like, oh my God, this time's like, it's just rushing and so much is going on and it's so hard to keep up and I don't know what to do. And am I failing? Am I doing okay? Am I doing enough? It's scary. It feels a lot of the time like you need to be doing more, or that you maybe haven't done enough for the point that you're at. I mean, as humans, we're constantly comparing ourselves, whether we like to admit it or not. It's just a thing. We compare ourselves, even if on the other side of what we're comparing, we don't even want that. We don't even want those things, or we don't even care for those things, but yet we still do it anyways because it's just in human nature. It's how our brains work. We compare everything, and it's sadly just how it is. Now, does that mean we can live a life where we're not letting that lead everything we do? Of course. But for the sake of this, I think that's where, in part, that dip in our late 20s comes from. It's this race against time where we're putting all this pressure on ourselves when we actually don't have to put all this pressure on ourselves because nothing's ending. We're literally just learning more about ourselves and growing. So that's a big thing I've noticed. And then it says that there's a rise again in the early 30s. And I think that, like it mentioned here, comes from this combination of responsibility and self awareness, because you now have the opportunity to take all of the things that you've learned in the world and then take all of the things that you've learned about yourself and live with that and do what you want to do, which is actually kind of incredible if you ask me, because that just means you have more autonomy over yourself. And maybe that's not the case for everybody all the time. Of course, that makes complete sense. But it is really, really special knowing that you can take all that you've learned and harness everything you know now to make more informed decisions, to make more informed choices in general, in anything, whether that's something as simple from day to day as food, what you want to eat, what kind of clothes you might want to wear, to things like your career, things like partnership, things like relationships in general. It's kind of exciting to know that there's so much that can be impacted from what you've learned and how much you can do with everything that you've learned. So, enough about the scientific facts here. I do want to talk about my personal experience. That's a big part of why I do trying times in general, but also why I wanted to do this episode on my birthday and turning 30 and all of that stuff, because I just feel like it's nice to be able to talk to somebody about it and not just sit there and be like, oh my God, 30, what does this mean, or what's going on? But just to be able to talk about it and be like, okay, cool, this is how I think, this is how I feel. And I'm excited to share that. So let's get into that. Turning 30 for me felt like stepping into a slightly higher version of myself. That sounds very, very, what is it? What's the word I'm looking for here? Just annoying. That sounded very annoying. No, but it did feel like stepping into a better version of myself. And to put it in a nicer way, it feels like someone who understands the value of patience, of boundaries, of self-compassion in ways that I couldn't even have imagined understanding, let alone having fathomed at like the age of 25. Personally, without saying so much, I think in the last 5 years of my life, I've probably experienced so much more than I could have anticipated experiencing. And that made most days quite uncomfortable internally. And it really stretched my 20s out to a point where I did not know how I was going to be functioning the next day or the next year, what have you. And it was a very difficult time. So to be able to step into 30 versus where I was at 25 or 26 or 27 is like an amazing thing for me. It's very exciting, if I'm speaking very transparently, because it's a new thing that I could not have imagined for myself. And I think that this era in general for many people feels scary. On the other side of it, it should feel, hopefully for most people, very exciting, because you made it through some very difficult times, some very self-critical times, I would like to say. And also that too, at the expense of having tried so much and learned so much and done so much, I think your 20s are meant for experimenting in all facets of the word, truly, in whatever area of life that might be in. We're just constantly learning about ourselves by doing. And it's truly uncomfortable, but it's not something that we're meant to avoid or not do just because it feels uncomfortable. I think as much as I wish that that were the case, it's not. And it's important to do things, to live life, to experience, to be able to be out of your comfort zone, to understand and grow within yourself, to know more about yourself. So before I sound like a broken record, yeah, I think stepping into my 30s just felt like a nice fresh start in a way. But I have like all of this knowledge in the back of my head of like, okay, here's what I know I do like, here's what I know I don't like, and so forth. And that's really, really nice to have. So going off of that, I've noticed that I no longer measure success the same way, which can go in, again, all facets of life: career, relationships, personal care, really a lot of stuff. I think I'm still working on it in some ways, but I don't really apply it the same way that I used to. And I can also say comparison doesn't sting as much as it used to. Does that mean it's not happening? No, of course it's happening. Like I said earlier in this episode, it happens for everybody, but I just think that it doesn't sting as much as it used to. Meaning it's there, but is it burning a fire under me? No. I think as you get older, and this is going to sound really corny, so forgive me, but your only point of competition should just be a previous version of yourself or yourself, where you're constantly pushing yourself to try, you're pushing yourself to learn, you're pushing yourself to do, not to the point of burnout by any means, but to the point of learning and trying to know more about yourself. I think that's what's the most important thing. So yeah, I no longer measure success in the exact same way, and comparison is definitely still present. I think it always will be, but it's not bothering me the way that I think it used to. It's a little bit more of a measured comparison that actually makes sense now, as opposed to where it was maybe 5 or 10 years ago. On that note, I will say some days I feel very proud of how far I've come. And then other days I still wrestle with uncertainty about career, relationships, life choices, all of that. And I echo the sentiment a lot of the time, I think, to my closest friends and loved ones. I try to, at least, who might be feeling the same way. But also here, I just want to share that that's actually okay. It's totally okay to not know. It's totally okay to feel uncertain or unsettled. It's actually more than okay, because in feeling those things and in trying different things, like I've said so many times, you're probably like, I don't want to try nothing. I promise you that's how we learn and it's how we grow. I know it's annoying and no one wants to do it. Believe me, I get it, but we have to. We do have to do the thing. So yeah, we can't avoid it. And what this point has really taught me is that growth is ongoing. So there isn't a moment where you suddenly are just like, oh, I have it all figured out. Or, okay, cool, if I go and do this, it's going to make me feel better. Or if I go and do this, then everything's sorted. That's not the case. And if that's the way life worked, then we would all be sorted or figured out. And that's just not realistic. I think that there's a shift, though, in how you navigate uncertainty and start to learn to honor your own journey. So earlier, just as I was saying with that idea of no longer measuring success in the same way, and comparison doesn't sting as much as it used to, you start to have this shift mentally about, okay, cool. If something doesn't go my way, or if something completely goes awry, how can I handle that? What's the next step? Is it to fix every single thing? No, but what can I do next to make it just this much better? That's what I mean by navigating uncertainty. And in that process, you start to learn to honor your own journey, because not everybody's journey is the same, and it's not meant to be the same. Because if it was the same, then shit would be really boring, truth be told. But the fact that it's not makes for life to be a little more exciting. It's a little bit nicer, I think. So yeah, that's a really important point. And the last thing that I'll share here is something that I've kind of already said a million times, is just about integrating lessons from the past while still allowing space to evolve. So let's say you've learned that you don't like something. Let's say that you tried a food and you're like, oof, I really don't like this food. Does that mean you're not going to eat food from that entire cuisine that you tried ever again? Maybe, if you're like, oh, I really can't. But on the other hand, don't let that stop you from trying something else within that same cuisine. Don't let that stop you from doing anything else. So in the same sense that maybe, let's say, you met somebody new and you guys are getting along really well. This could be platonic or whatever else. And then things just didn't pan out. Does that mean you're never going to go meet somebody ever again, try to get along and try to learn about them and learn about yourself through the process? No, you're going to do it again. even if you don't feel like it, you're going to do it again. So I think that highlighting those kinds of things is really important because that is in sum what entering your 30s feels like after having lived out your 20s. Taking those little life lessons or those things along the way that you've learned and integrating them into things that you're doing moving forward. And it's so important and it's so integral. Okay, so before I round this episode out, I always like to do some sort of like audience participation or submission or maybe something that I found on Reddit. And for the sake of this episode, I want to share a post that I did find. I believe it was on Reddit, but someone basically shared this post saying, 30 feels like the first age where I actually know myself, but I'm still allowed to change, which I thought was such a beautiful sentiment. And on that note, I have read something somewhere before where somebody said your 20s are like your teen years of adulthood, where you're just trying everything and you're figuring everything out for the first time, and you're not meant to know what to do. And then your 30s are meant to be like your first actual chance at trying to be an adult. So you're still going to make mistakes, but you're going to take all the things that you learned in your teen years and just try to learn from that and keep pushing anyways. So I felt like that quote kind of went hand in hand with that. Another person wrote a little bit about learning that milestones aren't deadlines, which is something I think I talked a little bit about earlier as well, and that your career, friendships, and personal growth don't need to follow anyone else's timeline. And I think that this is something that's so easy to become influenced over the course of this time in particular because everybody's moving at a different pace. And I think in the past, I've talked about in another episode, I don't remember which one, but I've talked about this idea of everybody for the first time ever being at a different stage in life versus having spent our whole lives in school and everybody moving at the same level or moving at the same track. And even if we're not doing the same thing, we're still in the same stage of life. This feels uncomfortable because we're not anymore. And that's actually a really good thing that we're not anymore. But yeah, I wanted to note that timeline is never going to look the same for everyone. And if it did, again, boring. I know in hindsight it sounds like it's fun. It actually wouldn't be fun. Moving along. Others noted that hitting 30 comes with a sense of liberation. So this pressure to perform diminishes and you become more aligned with what truly matters to you, which is true because you spent time learning about yourself, or maybe you haven't gotten the chance to do too much of that yet, but this is still a time for you to do that and to learn about yourself. Truly, your whole life is a time for you to learn that and do that. But if you haven't so far, then this is your chance. And if you have quite a bit, then this is your chance to continue doing so using what you already know, which is so good. And then the last note that I'll share here, and I thought this was a really good one to end on, is that it's a reminder that turning 30 isn't about perfection. It's about perspective, honesty, and the freedom to keep learning. As you can tell, that's been my theme throughout this whole episode of just learn. Probably really annoying, I know, I'm sorry. But also I'm not. I think that nothing bad can ever come from trying your best and learning. So just put yourself out there and try. That's really all you can do. And I don't know, we're hitting 30, then do it. If you're older than 30, do it. If you're younger, do it. I don't care. If you feel like trying something, just go do it. Because the worst thing that you can learn from it is that you don't like it, but you tried. And that's really it. That's all I have to say. Yeah, this episode was a little bit all over the place, but it was also a little bit funny to record after having taken the month off and not recorded at all. So I wasn't sure how it was going to go, but I actually really enjoyed this and it felt really nice to do. I'm not going to lie. I'm really tired today and have the worst headache. So I wasn't really feeling up to doing anything, but I'm glad that I sat here and did this because it actually felt nice to be able to talk my thoughts out, share them, and hopefully they resonate with you. And if they don't, then thank you so much for listening either way. I appreciate your time and your energy and your care. So thank you. If you ever want to chat, which please do, please feel free to message me on Instagram at the Trying Times Podcast. I'd love to talk to you more about maybe what you've learned in your life so far, regardless of age, or things that maybe you want to try or things that you want to do. Maybe you're nervous to do it. Hit me up. Let's talk about it because I too get nervous to do things and then still I try to force myself to do them anyways. So I'm here to encourage you if you need that too. But yeah, I appreciate you listening and sharing your time with me. Thank you so much. We'll chat again soon, okay? Bye.